Hi, welcome to the subcommittee of the Barrington Affordable Housing Trust, ADU program subcommittee. To read the stuff. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and Governor Healy's March 29th, 2023 revised order extending remote participation by all members in any meeting of the public body. This meeting of the Great Barrington Affordable Housing Trust AD Subcommittee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with the right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website at www.townofgb.org. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to listen to the meeting may do so in the following manner. By attending this meeting via Zoom as provided at the top of the agenda. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. Great. Our agenda for tonight starts with reviewing the edits that we made between meetings, which appear in the purpose section, and then when it goes on to finalizing administrative details before moving to the marketing plan, pilot fund size, and application selection and process section, and then ends with trustee, citizen, and media time. I'd like to propose, since Chris is coming a little bit later, that we skip item 2 and address it after we do item 5. Would that be agreeable?
Sure.
Great. So,
yep.
Now that we're following all the rules, let's start with just reviewing and affirming the edits made in purpose. So what's highlighted in the turquoise is where I made edits based on our last meeting. I think it was the language around meeting cost of living. Does that look better to people?
It looks correct, yes.
Are you able to share your screen?
For some reason, I can't. I don't know what the technical glitch is on this computer, and it only comes up. This is the only meeting where I'm ever remembering I need to try to fix it. If somebody else would like to share their screen, I would welcome that. I think that's what we ended up doing last time.
All right, let me see if I can get to the document, which I downloaded at some point. If I can find the document, I'll do that.
I can, to keep us going, I will. So it reads, it's the third reason in the purpose, Joe, if you'll remember, and it reads, provide an opportunity for resident homeowners who may not meet 100% AMI, but experience strain meeting cost of living in Great Barrington to meet cost of living with additional ADU income by supporting construction and renovation costs.
So we're talking about the homeowner. Yeah, I don't see an issue with that.
The first reason being adding affordable, the first purpose being to add affordable ADUs to the market. The second, to test viability of partnering with resident homeowners directly to increase AMI protected housing in Great Barrington.
Yep.
Then the third.
May not meet 100% AMI.
Right, so the homeowner doesn't have to meet the income requirement necessarily.
Basically, this will be helpful when we're in the last section, but this is where we're saying one of the purposes of this program is to help people who don't necessarily meet the AMI requirement, but are having trouble being able to afford to live in Great Barrington. So that when we're prioritizing applicants that best meet the purpose, it will allow us to say, oh, wow, this income will really make a difference for this applicant in a way it wouldn't for this other applicant. Let's go, like, let's give this, the first applicant a higher score in that area.
Right.
It's fine.
Okay, great. So, Bill.
Yes, almost there.
It's time to talk about marketing plans.
I found the document. I'm trying to expand it a little bit bigger. There we go. All right, now I'll see if I can share my screen. Screen share. Let's see. How's that?
That's great.
Great.
Where are we going?
We're down at the bottom in the section that says marketing plan.
Ah, yes, there we are. Everybody see that?
Hmm.
Yep. So our task here is to identify our goals and objectives for any marketing plan, and then what's at a concept level, what is it we think that we'd like marketing to look like for this to be successful.
Hmm.
And Bill, you were the person who said we needed to have this as part of the pilot. I actually agree with you.
Yeah. I think this is fine.
Well, we don't have a marketing plan yet. We have, like, our task tonight is we have to, like, say what's the goal and what should it look like.
And how much money do we need to implement it? Is that part of our AHT budget line?
That's a good question. I mean, I don't imagine that any marketing plan that we would come up with would be a huge amount. And I wonder if the appropriate place for it to come out of is the administrative.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Fund.
I think we could do that. I think Fred is also looking to, sort of clean up some old grants. So we take a look at what's available and just take it from there.
So maybe it will help us if we think about who do we want to know about this as an opportunity, and then what strategy would
Right.
best reach them.
With the least amount of money, I think if we were to advertise this in well, we can go with the Shopper's Guide, but also there's Eileen Mooney's newsletter. We could probably get some free press there even, I don't know. Eileen has often done free advertising for the Housing Trust.
Christopher's here. Chris Rumbold's here.
Oh, sorry. I have to get back to wherever it is I let him in. Do I have to get rid of my screen sharing for that?
If you do, it's okay, but
Yeah.
you just get back.
Okay, I'm going to just stop screen sharing, I think. Oh, there we go.
So we're trying to reach homeowners in the town of Great Barrington.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, if I was doing it just off the top of my head, I would, I'd start with Facebook, which is mostly free. Facebook is actually kind of tricky because they kind of hide things from people. So there's actually there's some argument for throwing not too much money at it, if you really want to reach people, because you're basically that's their business, is you're basically bribing them to put things in front of people's eyeballs. I would think Facebook, on the different forums, and then maybe push ads, but not a lot of money. Signs.
Probably put something
Sign.
in, in the senior center newsletter or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That could be a target audience there too.
Yeah.
So we need a little graphic and some copy.
Chris,
Things.
Chris, what, Ellen's still doing some communications for the town, right?
I don't know.
It looks like we have Chris, but maybe don't have Chris.
Oh, there we are.
Well, he's unmuting. He's muted now.
I've asked him to unmute. Hello? Chris, are you there?
He's muted now.
Yeah, I can't unmute him. I can ask him to unmute, but that's all I can do. See.
Part of what I'm wondering is if, like if the town has a template for how they push out social media information.
I think they might, but I don't know who does that.
I think it's Ellen, but I could be wrong, and Chris would know.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. I had to change cameras, which is also my mic. All right, double header tonight.
Yeah.
We appreciate you stretching your day for us.
The question was about Ellen. Yeah, she does our PR.
Yeah, so we skipped down to the marketing plan and skipped over two because we wanted to be able to go back to that when you were here. But that what the question I was having was like what exists in terms of kind of like existing town template for getting information out to the town that we could really just be tapping into and not rethinking. Like if in terms of getting information out about an opportunity to apply.
The best thing to do is to create your own content, your own flyer, and then just push it out through her channels. I think that's the best way to ensure that what you want, the information you want, is clearly communicated. It's tough sometimes to tell it to another party and have them translate it, and it just doesn't come out.
I mean, if we can put words together, I can put some pictures together from somewhere and hand it out.
The housing trusts, what Bill has done for the housing trust, works really well. So there's flyers, there's basic information, PDFs on the website that can just go out and get pushed out. That's the best way to do it.
Honestly, I'm not too worried about it as long as the actual package of information is clear, like sort of apart from a marketing, just like the actual program being easy to understand.
Yeah.
And being able to fit onto like a single piece of paper, or like being able to have like an information session and people show up and they walk away saying, yeah, I can do this. So so I'm not too worried. I'm not too worried about the marketing. Sorry.
So we want to have an info session.
I think after you start it, after you do a kickoff, you have an info session.
I've also, Well, I don't think this will be relevant for the time frame we're working on, but it's also possible that the school district could include a flyer in parent email.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
It's interesting to me that nobody has brought up any of the print media. What I think that a news story would be a really good way to get the, like, I think of like, I always think like in this kind of thing, you want word of mouth too.
Mhm.
So you want like, I want it to be that somebody sees it and they're like, oh, this isn't me, but they talk about it to somebody who's like, oh, maybe it's me.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so if we're gonna do an info session, like kind of honing in on then what are the two things we want people to remember when they're talking to other people? And is it an info session and there's information on the website? Or,
Yeah, I mean, we could put everything up on the Housing Trust website. And just provide links to that from anything else we post. And you could download the little flyer that has the program outlined. Anything like that. That can all be just put up on the website.
It's amazing to me, once you get a story in the Eagle or the Edge and or an interview on WAMC, how quickly they get passed along.
Yep.
It's really successful.
yeah, so there's two ways in my experience to go about that. One is a press release.
Mhm.
The other is calling people.
I would, if I could, recommend a brief press release or press advisory that says, here's what we're doing. We really want to talk to you. We really want you, WAMC, to interview us about this program.
Great.
So,
A press release is just a blanket, everybody gets the same information, which is great. The Edge likes those right now. But the Eagle has the resources to do more work, and so does WAMC.
yeah,
And it's worthwhile.
okay.
Yeah.
And Spectrum 1, or Spectrum 9, 1, whatever they are. Sure.
Does anybody know? Because I'm gonna put it in my notes.
I don't know.
Call it Spectrum News.
Spectrum 1, we're going with.
I think it's Spectrum News.
Okay, Spectrum News. And the Eagle. And AMC. Okay, so what we have kind of for our concept is our target is homeowners in Great Barrington and generating word of mouth.
So we'll need some words to go with whatever we send out. Yeah, press release of some kind. Describes the program in one paragraph.
That, and then we have a kind of community-based strategy would be the newsletters like Eileen's, the senior center, the shopper's guide, school e-blasts, and then social media. I'm assuming we'd also be able to put something up on, in addition to our website, the town website and town social media.
Yep.
That we would, part of our strategy would include an info session and information on our website. Then we'll do a press release targeting for in-depth stories, Spectrum News, The Edge, The Eagle, WAMC.
Yes.
All right,
That's
so next steps on that.
I think putting together the press release is step one.
Yeah. I'm just thinking, I think in terms of like, this is pretty much the plan. And we'd be drafting a press release and website content. And you wanted to do flyers too, right? flyer/social media. I
Yeah.
will say for social media, it is good to like reformat from a page format.
Yeah, I would just put up something that fits the Facebook format.
And we should also do Instagram. So if we can get to like a square,
Do we have Instagram? I don't know if we do.
maybe it's time.
Oh, probably, yeah.
So my experience at Railroad Street is at this point, we're really seeing some pretty solid age differences between Instagram and Facebook in a way that wasn't even true a few years ago. And some of that is just generational, but some of it is, I think, Facebook made it some changes that made it less useful to a younger generation.
Mhm.
So I think it is good for us to go with Instagram, because even though I don't see 20 somethings being the one to apply, or even early 30 somethings, because they're just priced out of being in a homeowner position, I do see them as like maybe knowing the person in
Right.
their network who might do it and
Long as
be
they know-
interested in these kinds of solutions.
Yeah. Yes, as long as they know that if mom and dad put an ADU on, they can't necessarily live there.
Mm.
I mean, that's under admin, is to have wrap up that discussion about, what is it called, Mrs. Murphy's.
Yeah.
All right, so that we talked out marketing, go team. Do you guys want to go back to admin, or just go through the end of this, talk about how much we want
Let's
to
go.
represent in the trust?
Let's go to the admin stuff. That's stuff that Chris can talk to, right?
Yeah,
Want
some
the
of it.
worksheet up again?
Yes, please.
So there were three things. I was confirming with Jane the earlier conversation I'd had with her about construct doing verification, and we're just missing each other as we try to connect on that. So that's still pending, and I will know before our next Affordable Housing Trust full trust meeting. The next item was the fair housing discussion we were having, which I was also going to ask for Jane's input on, but the question was specifically, how does the rental have to be posted? And then how does Mrs. Murphy's rule apply to ADUs? And Joe, I think I had sent you something that I found after doing some Googling. It just doesn't seem to me that it's clear when it's an ADU, because, and Chris, the question I had for you is, are all ADUs by definition separate from the main residential building, or are some of them attached?
No, they're accessory in terms of an ADU is accessory in terms of use. So there's always a principal residential use on the property, but it could be within the same building.
So I think,
Apartment within the same building.
Yeah.
So
it can be
in the same building, Mrs. Murphy's rule clearly applies.
What is Mrs. Murphy's rule? I must have missed this.
It's it's the rule that it's like an exception to the standard fair housing rules around how you can select tenants if it's also your primary residence. And like, if you live, like, so it's called Mrs. Murphy rule, because it's like, if it's Mrs. Murphy lives in the house and is renting out the apartment in the same house she lives in.
Right. You can rent it out to whoever you want
Yes.
in your house.
Thank you.
In which case, we'd be back at a relative could build the apartment over the garage for a family member.
Hmm.
Like we wouldn't be regulating how the only thing we'd be regulating on tenant selection is income eligibility.
Right, except that's going to look really bad if that's our pilot.
Well,
Mm.
I mean, I would say to that, I would say two things. One, I recommend we just follow the law and not make things more complicated, and that we focus on making sure we understand the law to apply it to the program.
Right.
I think that secondarily, we have, we have a second tool that is really about how we score applicants. And if we build that well to really be about the core purpose of the program, I think that we will be comfortable with the applicants we select. And if it so happens that it is a relative situation, that's still, like, I just think that the foundation of our decision would be so strong that it wouldn't feel like it was a disservice to the program.
Well, there is a cautionary note here, though, because we're giving town money for this grant loan. And it's likely CPA funding, not necessarily, but more than likely we're going to be using CPA funding. That may constrain Mrs. Murphy. And I think we need to get legal clarification on that.
I would find that very helpful.
Yes.
What's
Chris?
the best way to do that, Chris?
I will have a discussion with town council on this.
That would be
Yeah.
great. I do think the more we can just kind of have it be that whatever the law is, we just follow it, and then we have an application criteria that meets the goals,
Right.
the
But we
better
have-
we'll be positioned.
Yes. We have
Because
to make
at
that
the time
clear.
of building, we won't, at the time of building and at the time of the application, there actually is no reason for us to know who the tenant is. Like, that's really not part of our process. And in most cases, in any case
Right.
that we family, we really wouldn't know.
That's right.
Um,
They may not necessarily have somebody lined up to rent,
Right.
which would be better.
Well, I mean, and how could you have somebody lined up to rent in most scenarios? Because
Right.
you need the time to build the thing.
That's right.
wait.
All right, so that's great. I appreciate that you can do
Wait.
that.
Okay. Yeah, we just need council to tell us, but I'm saying if you have a Section 8 HUD housing voucher, you will not be allowed to have a family member as your landlord.
All right.
And however, in some circumstances, it's possible to make a disability accommodation. So I know it's different, but it's not. But it's also, I mean, I know it's not, we're not going through Section 8 in particular. I
Right.
just feel like that, but that's sort of the like comparison.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure.
We had a situation come up with the down payment assistance where the parents were holding the mortgage and their kids were buying the house. And it just
Mhm.
didn't seem right at all. We took a pass on it. I just couldn't see that working out and being a legitimate use of our money.
Because the parents didn't meet AMI,
Oh, yeah, the parents didn't meet AMI and
but
the kids did.
the kids were, it wasn't that the parents were co-signing the mortgage, they were the sole holders.
They were holding the mortgage. So basically we'd be giving them $25,000.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, and that didn't seem right. So we didn't do that. And I think we could get into the same sort of situation here. I think we really need no clarity.
Yeah, I do think that I think differently than you about this. And part of why I think differently about it is that it's impossible. It is impossible to get housing here
I know.
for a huge chunk of people, and even more impossible to purchase a home. And the rate at which we are losing
Oh, yeah.
generations, like a whole generation of people who have chosen to stay in the Berkshires, which is already like we already have a small number of folks who choose to stay in the Berkshires post high school. And that the only way people in that group can purchase and stay and make this where their family is, unless they're making, what is it? Like, I feel like I was in a meeting, Chris, where you threw out, or maybe I saw in an article, you know, if you matched income with like the purchase housing market, it like starts at 160, you know, K or something.
Oh.
So the only way people can stay is by doing like finding the creative thing. And
Yeah.
My goal is for people to be able to stay and have housing and be in our community. And I don't, all of those creative things are abuses.
I would say that I also don't feel passionately about like preventing somebody who is meeting the like necessity requirement from renting to their kids in order to have them stay. I think the question that like, and I'm not a lawyer, so we just need counsel to help us with this. But I think what it hinges on is the question of that CPA requires us to create affordable housing. And when we're creating that affordable housing, does it then also require that affordable housing to be essentially fair housing in the sense of, you know, with no, I don't know. So that's the problem. So that was the argument from.
So my understanding, and correct me if somebody has different information, but my understanding is the CPA restriction is a legal restriction that ties us to the income limit and requires requires that housing be affordable housing for a restricted period of time. In cases where we put it in perpetuity, in cases where we're investing in something, it can be a different period of time.
Yeah, I agree.
Fair housing law is fair housing law, and if it applies here, then it applies here, and if Mrs. Murphy's rule it applies here, it applies here. And so to me the question is, would we further would we place a restriction that we are not obligated to place?
Yeah, so I agree. So like, you know, I've read the whole CPA language, and I see the CPA language as being very, it's left broad. And the CPA language just says, in order to create affordable housing, and it defines affordable housing, but then it doesn't say this other part, because it's not the same as a Section 8 program, which is like a formal Section 8 program. So like if a regular landlord says, I'm gonna do this, go Section 8, then they are not allowed to, they're not allowed to rent to their family members, like, period.
Right. This
is not Section 8, this is a different program. The issue that was brought up by Mass Housing, I guess, when I emailed them, they're saying that you're creating affordable housing the issue they were saying is kind of like meta principle of you're taking public money to create affordable housing. So you're taking money to create affordable housing equals a public good. But then if the candidate pool is limited to family members, it's no longer a public good, it's a private good. That was their argument.
Yeah.
They were saying that it's not in the language of, it's not in any like statute. It's that they were saying like the problem is that when you give somebody some money and then they turn around and then the money, essentially the benefit doesn't, it's not the problem is that you take public money to create a private benefit. That's how they were framing it.
Makes sense.
So I don't know. So yeah, I mean, but council could tell
Yeah.
us.
That, yeah, and
Oh.
that was like sitting that with the Mrs. Murphy's rule, that's why we need somebody more informed than us to understand
Yes,
how to.
sure, for sure.
And then I think secondarily, we need to know if Mrs. Murphy's rule does apply. Is there a discussion that you all want to have that we would further restrict?
No, that wasn't my concern. My concern was that we don't want to do something that's not allowed.
So would it be accurate to say that our recommendation is that we get the advice of council,
Yeah.
and then that is the policy?
Yes. I would go along with that.
Yes, I think, sure, yes.
That will be the policy you recommend.
Yes.
Yes.
But before we start telling people about this, we need to get clarity on that and get it
Yeah.
written down in writing somewhere.
Well, I'm not worried about that because we haven't even adopted this as a trust yet.
Right. Right. But,
So we won't move forward on any of it until that happens.
Yeah.
I'll email council before I leave tonight.
Thank you, Chris. And then the last administrative piece to finalize or wrap up was completing the discussion we were having about the notice of default and discussion of a lien with banks as lenders.
Mhm.
Who's sharing the screen? Is that Amanda?
That's me.
Could you get rid of the right side of your Adobe? Just close that arrow. Whoop.
And get to it. This here.
Yeah, go down below redact. To the left below redact. See the
There's a
arrow?
little,
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, now open up your AHTF workshop tab at the top.
the tap.
Oh, yeah, there it
Yep.
is.
Great. Oh, now get rid
Oh,
Press the arrow
Get
again.
rid of that arrow again. It just gives us a little bit more of a screen.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
So in this section, last time we met, we were talking about what were the mechanisms, like what would happen if things went wrong.
Mhm.
And we said that a lien is an option if things go wrong, and that we were just at that, our discussion was that it would occur, the lien would occur at the time of the last disbursement.
Oh, lien is LIEN.
Thank you.
As opposed to lien.
An interesting thing is that while we can improve our reading skills our entire lifetime, spelling, like you get like what you got as a kid and how your brain works, that's it.
That's very.
Isn't that interesting? Well, and for me, it was like, oh, I'll stop worrying about that then.
Ah,
It's like, this is just gonna be the way it is.
just go with it.
So
Yeah, I feel like, Chris, there was maybe something you were wanting to follow up. There was, Bill, was it your question about, did you, I'm just trying to reconstruct our conversation.
I think it had to do with
If you, there was a
How-
question
how
about
come-
using the banks as lenders in this somehow.
oh, really?
Yeah.
Um,
But if none of us can remember what it was, then
I'm not,
I think we need to resolve it.
yeah, I think we were going to basically give them the money as a construction loan, reimburse for, you get the foundation poured, you get X amount of money, you get the framing done, you get more money.
Yeah, that we do 50% upfront and then the remaining 50% would be cost reimbursement as it went.
Right, and so, I mean, the whole thing is contingent upon them actually renting it out to someone at an affordable rate. So if
Yeah.
they get it all built and they don't do that, we want that money back.
Yes.
So that has to be a binding legal agreement that if they fail to do that for 10 years or however long the specified amount of time was, they got to give us that money back, or we put a lien on the house for that amount.
Right.
Because otherwise somebody could say, oh yeah, I'm going to rent this out to somebody. And then it's all built.
So that was that the idea that at the disbursement, we record the lien and it says, with this grant, we're also putting this lien on the house,
Mhm.
on the property, saying
Yeah.
we gave $50,000 or whatever it is.
Yep.
Yeah, that lien can be modified by the town, by the lien holder,
Mhm.
If they're following the rules and they're renting it at an affordable rate to an income qualified household, that's great for a certain amount of time, and then it goes away.
Yeah, so what we said was, all right, if we're in the phase where construction is not complete, should the landlord applicant fail to maintain primary residency on the property after loan approval before or during construction, funds will be withdrawn.
Yeah.
After construction, owners who cease to reside on the property after occupation will not be eligible to turn 50% of the loan into a grant.
Right.
Then we had the discussion about the repayment structure. And we shifted it to repayment would start at 10 years or at time of sale if the new buyers did not choose to transfer the lien. And that there'd be three options, that 50% is due with monthly payments over 10 years, or an option to extend an additional 10 years of rental at AMI and have the remainder of the loan forgiven. So it's like repayment at full at 10 years, repayment, or at full meaning the 50% that wasn't forgiven.
Mhm.
So we didn't, in that section, we didn't discuss if they fail to rent, but I feel like we did have that conversation.
Yeah. We should just include that somewhere in there.
Yeah.
That if they fail to meet the terms of the agreement, we get the money back. And the agreement includes renting it to someone at an affordable rate for at least 10 years. That's all.
Right. So after construction, owners who cease to reside on the property after occupation or who fail to rent. Well, I want to make this clear. So I don't want to penalize people who are, in the event this could be true. I don't think it would be true in the current market. But like, let's say somebody, like, I don't want to penalize somebody who they are making the property available for somebody who meets the criteria, and they're not violating the terms, but maybe they don't have the rental full. That to me doesn't mean that they're failing in the agreement. Whereas if they're intentionally just not renting it, or if they're renting it to somebody who at the time they became a tenant did not qualify for the AMI guideline, that would be a failure to comply.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, if you're advertising it for rent and you can't find a tenant, which would be unusual, that's okay, but maybe you get 3 months of that and then you're kind of done. You can't find a tenant in 3 months of advertising for a rent that's up to 100% of area median income. You're not advertising very well, or you don't really want to rent it.
So let's say if it says this, after construction, owners who cease to reside on the property after occupation, or who fail to make the property available for rental or fail to rent to a qualified tenant will not be eligible to return the 50% of the loan into a grant. You want them to return everything.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that would make it that they were the full grant. They were responsible for the full loan.
I think if they're not going to agree to the terms. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And are you saying you want to say that like there's a time frame at which it becomes due in full?
Oh,
6 months.
yeah. I mean, it's so unlikely that you can't find someone to rent something that's affordable here.
Yeah.
That I don't see that as being a reasonable
It might be
someone not to fulfill the terms of the agreement.
a weird ADU they made. You know, they might have like made something that turns out nobody wants. Yeah, like
I just had a young person show there's a staff member of their new rental, and it's a closet with a bed in it. So
yeah.
I don't think that we will have that problem.
Yeah.
If we're gonna put a time frame on it, I think it's important that we're not in the business of making people more financially precarious. So we need to be careful how we do things like that. So I would like, and we're not like, we're going to get the money back, right? That's the whole, like, we're going to get the money back. So what would be the downside to being a little bit cautious and having it be like, it's a 12-month window before the loan's due in full?
Yeah, I like 12 months.
Okay. Yeah, I think at some point you just have to say, you know,
Yeah.
we gave you that money for a reason.
I
And
think 12 months is reasonable.
okay. Yeah, it's a long-term prospect, so 12 months seems all right. You know, it's a long time to. And now what if they are renting it to somebody at a market rate during that 12 months?
Oh, good.
I
No.
mean, I say, like, to me, I look at that as they're like, once they're in non-compliance, once they're over the line,
Yeah,
once they're in non-compliance, they have a 12-month window to correct it. If they don't correct it in that period of time, they have to,
the lien goes on the property for the full amount.
they have to pay up.
Yeah. And we should be able to put a lien on the property for that amount as part of the initial agreement.
Yeah. So this is not my area of expertise. The note I had from our last meeting was that we discussed at what point does the lien happen, and the note says it would occur at the time of the last disbursement. is that still how we want it to be? I think we got there by kind of working through will it make sense in the administrative process?
Yeah,
Because at that point, you couldn't do it before then because all of the full value wouldn't have been dispersed. And there was some discussion about if there were other mechanisms, but I think we settled on that.
yeah. I mean, I think before we start giving out money, we need an agreement that states when that lien would start. You know, whether it's at the final disbursement or whether it's at the first disbursement. I mean, we're giving them 50% down, 50% upfront. There probably ought to be a lien starting with the first disbursement.
But couldn't you only do the lien for the amount dispersed?
I don't know.
Like
Chris,
how
any idea?
Well,
how can I be liable for money you haven't given me yet?
True.
right. I think a legal contract. It's a grant agreement, it's a contract that says, here's what you're gonna do. You're gonna get this money, you're gonna construct the unit, you're gonna market it in this affirmative way and you're gonna rent it at this affordable rate. And in return for these funds, if you don't do it, we have the right to put a lien on the property
Mhm.
to recapture the money. Or we can take other action, whatever that might be. And we'll record against the property, whether it's a lien or some sort of restriction that says you got $50,000 over 10 years, it's gonna go down to zero, assuming you're in compliance.
Right.
I think that can happen through legal documents. Maybe it's not a lien. I'm not sure,
Yeah,
but I'm
well-
thinking like, you sign a mortgage and there's a mortgage recorded against your property. But I also got like a construction loan on my property to do like additional improvements. That wasn't a mortgage. That was like a side legal agreement.
Right.
Where I'm sure if I read the fine print, I'd be really scared that the bank could just wipe me out and take my property.
Yeah.
So there's probably a mechanism like that is maybe not the form of a lien, but it's an enforceable legal contract between the trust.
Right.
and the grant.
We have something like that for the down payment assistance.
Right.
Yeah. We already have something like that established.
Yeah. And it seems to work well. And obviously it's banks have used it, lenders have used it.
Yeah.
And it seems to pass muster in that way, and it doesn't.
So, would we like to use the contract as the sole mechanism and not a lien? I mean, there's gonna have to be a contract no matter what.
Yep.
What we fleshed out last time was kind of thinking through if the lien was the mechanism. It sounds like what's on the table right now is to go forward with that or to choose just a contract-based enforcement.
I think the lawyer needs to tell us.
Okay.
It's the town lawyer, so he's charged with protecting the town's interest in this, and it's essentially the town's money, so I'm good with whatever the lawyer says.
Right.
So we probably need to present this to the group and come up with a draft of a document that would be the agreement between the ADU builder and the town or the trust.
Yeah, my suggestion process-wise would be for us to finish the last two sections of this so that we have a complete recommendation to make.
Okay.
I think we could have this, like, if we finish this tonight, I think we could have this discussion with the trust next week. But knowing we may or may not have the information back from town council, which I think is okay, like.
Yeah.
What our recommendation will be, we will follow that guidance. So that we don't really need to have further discussion about it. And then once we have that is when we'll start, like, once we know that the trust wants to do this.
Yeah.
And we have all of anything that's pending from town council, then we can start working on the packages that get the information out.
Right. Exactly.
So if it's okay with you all, I'd like to move to the budget line and what we'd like to request. I'm just going to put out there, I think that 150,000 for this pilot would be good.
Okay.
I don't know if we can convince our fellow committee members, but
Yeah. Aim for the stars.
aim for the stars.
I mean, best case scenario, it works like a charm and we get 3 or 4 units built. Worst
Yeah, and
scenario, we give the money back to the trust.
yeah, and I'm really curious what kind of applications we'll see.
Yeah.
And I do think, and this is our next section, is to kind of talk through the application process and the criteria, like how we'll solicit information against our criteria and weight it. But I could see that there's a possibility that the way it comes down is there's a few different proposals that we accept and it's multiple projects. But I could see us with a proposal where there's a single proposal that really, really meets all of the needs in a way that none of the other things do. And I like kind of having that room, that 150,000 means that there is the possibility that we could have an applicant fund something solely with this, something small. That's not a goal for me, but I like having that in the mix as a possibility.
Sure.
How many do you think at the most 150 might? 2 units, 3 maybe, depending on what their other sources are.
Yeah, I think it depends on a lot of things. And I think, if, for example, if there really is excitement and need for the tiny house model, you could do a bunch. I don't think the Great Barrington market is like that. I think we might get one. And then I think, so it could, I think maybe we're looking at two or 3.
Yeah, I mean, especially a tiny house when you're only having to, when all you have to do is just put in water and sewer and electric. That's a whole lot cheaper proposition. You could probably do that for 50,000 or less.
And 150 would mean that we could pretty much guarantee being able to support a applicant that met the criteria.
Yeah.
Tiny house and a different, more traditional ADU project.
Yeah.
That having that smaller chunk wouldn't just make something else impossible.
Right. Now, I'm just concerned that we do include putting a tiny house platform in as part of the ADU thing, because that allows someone.
Included by default by the town's definition of ADU.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it can be a movable tiny house. An ADU.
Okay.
And I know Amy, I don't know if she's here tonight, but I know Amy would encourage us to make sure that in our communications.
Yes.
But that also sits well with if we start talking a little bit about the application process. I had asked June at Construct if I could pick her brain about what she knows around how to make the actual process accessible, especially for communities that might be most in need. And one of the things that she recommended was us thinking about like how accessible we make the language, like being able to be like, to not just use ADU, but say like it could, it could be a tiny house. This might be an apartment in your house. It could be an apartment over your garage. Like we might
Plain language.
Plain language, yes.
plain language.
I know you talked about the length of the term, it was 10 years, but would you make the term longer if somebody got a $150,000 grant?
I
10
think
years
it must-
to me is pretty generous for that big of a grant. Vice versa, 10 years.
Yeah,
It's a
so-
generous grant for only 10 years of restriction.
I think my perspective on it is that I think we'd only give 150,000 if there was a high demonstrated need and not other ways to fund it. And
Mhm.
so in that scenario, the need is the thing that makes me feel like I don't need longer time. Like it really is an investment in the homeowner's ability to stay in their home too.
And I'm sure the rest of your fellow trustees will ask that question of you all. So
Mhm.
I mean,
I understand this is your recommendation to the full
yeah.
trust, and
And that's just like how I'm thinking about it. Bill and Joe, you might be thinking differently.
Sorry, about what?
the length of term for a large grant. And Nanda's response was, well, if it really meets a need and it's really important, then it's worth it.
Yes, you're saying it's very generous.
Could
Yeah,
be viewed as, very generous grant of funds for, hey, we should be asking for a permanent lien. I get that all the time. I got a town meeting many times this year. It was
Yeah.
Not,
and town didn't.
it was
seem
a
willing to
difficult
give,
discussion.
Right.
People think if we don't ask for tooth and nail and firstborn child, we're not asking for enough.
Yeah,
So that comes up.
I mean, I could see a few more years being added for if you go over $50,000, if you go over $100,000, or if you go to 150. Add, 2 years, 3 years on at each level.
Something to
That
think
would
about.
Yeah.
that would seem to make more sense to me.
Yeah, so the
Yeah.
actual numbers of it, so like if somebody wants to build a tiny house, then they need a $20,000 loan, and after 10 years they get back 10,000.
Mhm.
And then if somebody has a larger project, it's 100,000, and after 10 years they get back 50,000.
Mhm.
So I guess the question would be, why in one case does someone get more money? Because it's a larger project?
Because it's.
I guess, yeah. I guess we would prefer
It's
prefer this.
like what your end goal is, right? Like.
Yeah.
As we've articulated, our end goal is more ADU units. And more ADU units at affordable rates. And secure and leveraging that to secure current Great Barrington residents to be able to continue to live in Great. So to me, it's variable amounts will achieve that, and it will be different depending on the need of the applicants. But the on the larger loans, if you think about it, on the larger loans, we're going to get back more, or there's more incentive to continue to operate as an affordable housing unit for 20 years and not just 10.
Mhm.
I see. But we probably but also apples to apples, if we had like, if we got like the 6 like tiny, $6 $25,000 asks, we'd probably go with the 6. If it created 6 units versus
Oh, yeah,
one
But-
really nice unit.
I would challenge that because, and this is good discussion for this conversation. So what if you have 6 applications?
Mhm.
That the amounts would work really nicely for 150, but we have other applications that have higher need and better meet the criteria.
Oh,
See, that's
talking
what,
about,
like,
you're talking about with the needs of the owners.
yeah, so this is where I think this is the discussion I want to be having. How do we judge the applicants? What's our
Yeah.
scoring rubric, basically?
Okay.
So, there's going to be some basic things, like if they don't reside in Great Barrington and they're not buying a house in Great Barrington to do this, and they're not going to live on the property, those applications are just junk. But then I think there's the other parts, which is the extent to which it meets that third criteria of our purpose, which is about leveraging these funds not only for to support the tenant, but to secure the landlord's ability to meet cost of living in Great Barrington and continue to be part of our community. I think I would want to also consider like, can they do the project? Right?
Yeah.
Like we could,
That's
we
sure.
could have like, oh yeah, this would be great. This would really help you stay. But there's no way that you can do this for the amount of money you've applied for.
Yeah.
great.
Mhm.
And so I just had another thought, another way of thinking about funding these projects. And that is, I mean, nobody's going to be able to do the project for the amount of money we're offering. Even $150,000, that's going to be cutting it close. So they're going to have to get a bank loan as well.
Or they are somebody who's going to be doing their own, they are the labor on the project. Like
Yeah,
that's, I mean, there's different ways that people figure out how to get things done without money. Like
Yeah.
there's lots of people living without enough money to get things done and they still do it.
yeah.
So I'd be interested. So question, Joe, info session, do you think that's a requirement for people to have attended?
Oh, I don't think so. I mean, they should be no. I think you just have
Okay.
I feel like you just evaluate the proposal.
So an interesting thing June brought to my attention that I hadn't thought about before was that the complexity of an application around housing, things like this, often is the barrier to people applying. And that she said a way you can reduce that barrier is by having a 2-step application process. So the first step is simple and doesn't have everything. It's not where we really determine viability. It's almost like an interest, but it's an opportunity to be able to have, further conversation, even if we do that, even if we place an additional info session there for them to attend or something. And then you have the more detailed application with the budget and that's the pieces that I think we need to flesh out, like what needs to be in that application for us to be able to evaluate what we need to evaluate.
That's the initial one, the small application.
Yeah, I mean, I think the small application is like, I would say like you have the small application, and in the small application, you just dump anybody who's like not a resident, like they just clearly
Right.
don't meet. But anybody who might need it, then we do like an in-person info session.
Okay.
So that there's a place to ask questions, build confidence, and then they do the application that we evaluate for really who we're going to fund.
But that sounds like a good program. I like it.
All right. I like it too. I don't like the idea of having to do it, but I do think it's the right thing to do. So I am committed.
Okay. Yes, they could basically come to a housing trust meeting, present their application, ask us questions, we ask them questions, move on to step 2 or not, sort of like the CPA.
I would
Yeah,
definitely,
Maybe more friendly.
Yeah, more friendly.
yeah,
that's why I think an
Yeah.
info session would be. I think an info session would be a better vehicle.
Well,
I don't think it will be. I think it will be a barrier in a way that might make it hard for us to reach the people who might have the highest financial benefit from this. And I also don't think our skill set as a committee
Mhm.
is where I'd want it to be publicly vetting
yeah.
committee members.
good point.
Yeah. I wouldn't want to be vetted like on a, I mean, these are recorded, so
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to be, you know, on YouTube.
Right,
So I
Fine
think
for it.
okay, rule that out.
we will have to discuss the applications in the open meeting. And Chris, at that point, can you can you discuss applicants like as application A, application B? Or do you have to be discussing people publicly?
No, I think there are exceptions. You don't have to discuss personal things publicly.
I agree.
Well, I thought we kind of talked about this before. Is there a way that we can get like Construct to do the evaluation?
What we
Like-
talked about before is Construct, administering the tenant verification.
And then verification.
But I think this we have to do.
Do we though?
Did you say that, Chris?
I think it would be, well, go ahead, finish your thought.
Oh, I'm just if there was something that we could, you know, just have like somebody else to do, like just to say like, yep, they can do the project. I don't know, like just, you know, and we almost like grant them the money for them to disperse based on like
Yeah.
criteria that we give them.
I mean, that's
So-
essentially what happens with Construct, or whomever it might be, in this case, Construct, who manages the rental assistance program. They're granted the funds and they do the intake, and it's helpful because it takes a lot of the administrative burden off of the town's shoulders, and it doesn't put anybody in a public meeting spotlight.
Yeah.
With the down payment assistance program that the trust runs, the banks, the primary lenders do all the qualifications and whatnot, and we get a name and an address, and that's really it. The rest is, you know, it's presented to the trust as a qualified applicant. Do you want to make the grant or not? So we avoid having the public discussion that way. But in both of those cases, we're relying on other trusted expertise to help us with that work. I think you could do something similar with Construct or some other qualified group to vet the applications for not only, you know, qualifications of and income limits and whatnot, but also for qualifications, can they get the project done?
Yeah.
Maybe Habitat is good. They do a lot of construction, but you could reach out to your partners and see who
Yeah, the CDC might be interested too.
who might be able to do that.
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't
Yeah.
split, like, so if we did that, then what we'd be doing is we'd have to do an RFP for a subcontractor.
Yes.
You could,
RFP for
yeah,
contract, and then what do they get out of it? A cut?
We'd have to pay them.
Yes.
a
Okay.
fee, and this is what happens with Construct and the rental assistance program, which I know the trustees voted on a month or two ago. But I haven't dispersed those funds because I don't have an understanding of what their fee is yet. So it's like,
Oh, no.
it's usually very low. So a $50,000 program, I think they took like $2,000. So we didn't go through a full
Okay.
RFP process. It was just like, who's competitive? Okay, that's reasonable. In terms of the procurement process, that met our guidelines.
Was less than
So
10.
I assume that whomever would do this for the ADU program would be. It would be a nominal percentage fee or a flat fee that.
Yeah.
Wouldn't really rise to the level of having to do a full RFP procurement process.
Right. We can pay them as.
Yeah.
consultants.
So you
Yeah,
might,
so
oh, sorry, I was just gonna say, so in your discussion with the rest of the trustees, you might say. We want $150,000 to actually give to people, but, we think we should get another 5,000 for administrative.
yeah,
Something like that for somebody.
what I'm envisioning is a black box that you get basically like a candidate description, and actually, yeah, and you shouldn't even get the name. That you should get out something like more of like a narrative thing of they're asking for 50, they we think they can do it, or we think that they can do it if you give them 50, and here's like a narrative description of their need. And if we got, and so you'd be like, so you have like candidate B, candidate C, and that'd be it. And then then we could, in a discussion, we could just say like, here's how we want to divide it, like 625, 625 grants or like loans, or just two, whatever.
Right.
So
That would be it.
yeah.
Go ahead.
So the scenario where we subcontract some portion of the application selection process, we still do the PR.
Mhm. Yeah, we do the PR, and
You set the
and
criteria.
we decide the mix. Like, so it's like, so we just like, we get back a bunch of applications, and it's just like, and then someone else like rates them, and then we decide which ones we want to, how we want to cut it up. That would be my ideal situation.
We could hire as a consultant, Construct or CDC or Berkshire Housing or whoever, to say, to kind of rate the applicants and say, this is the positives and negatives of each applicant. Then we decide how we do it.
Yeah.
Is there a reason not to have them just select the applicants? Just say this, like, here's the goals. We've worked really carefully. This is the goal of our program.
Yep. Sure.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
of course, that then we're not even making the rubric.
Right. I think that's fine.
We're saying
we're not
we
making the rubric.
want you to select based on viability and the extent to which this
Right.
meets the purpose of the program.
Right. We set the parameters. They see who fits the parameters best. They tell us who we give money to.
Well, and then they could tell the town directly, and you never have an open meeting
Right.
law issue with, what happens in the meeting is that we get the update on
What they pick.
It's the selections have been made, they're the following projects.
Yep. That keeps our hands really clean of the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, I would be fine with that. Like, I don't think we need to do it. My only I think I feel like we would have to give them the rubric, or we'd have to maybe not the full rubric, but it's just like,
Yeah,
because we're trying to balance these two objectives. One is more housing, the other one is helping the owners.
right.
So, but yeah, I mean, if they can, if they can do it in a sensible way, then I think that's fine. Yeah, I don't need to be picking it.
Yeah.
So what I'm thinking on my list of things that I'd be directing the subcontractor to evaluate would be that it will in fact add an ADU.
Yes.
Mhm.
That, and I think probably the extent to which that ADU is an appropriate living space, like the proposed ADU is an appropriate living space. And the extent to which there is financial need by the landlord applicant. The viability of the proposed project. Like, it's, we don't want to fund somebody who's like, I can do this for $10,000. And you're looking at the project and there's no way that it can be done for $10,000. And then
Right.
that allowable, things that can be taken into consideration are additional funding sources that an applicant may have, whether that is savings, whether that is access to additional loan through a bank, or whether that is basically like sweat equity they can put in on the actual construction.
Mhm.
Right.
And we basically be like, you can consider any and all of these in determining viability. Is there anything we would say to them, like, we want you to be considering this in your decision making?
Well, one thing that you mentioned was considering, the need of the homeowner who's going to build the ADU. And I think even if it's not a real need, if there's not a real need there, that shouldn't disqualify them entirely. Because we may still get an ADU out of somebody that doesn't really need the money.
Right, that's why I want to, that's why, like, if I was doing it, I'd do an overall scoring rubric, and so you could have somebody score low in that one area, but high in the rest.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That would be fine.
Yeah, it's just a factor. Yeah.
So we'd have to make up the rubric more or less.
Well,
Yeah.
that's where I'm saying, like, I think if we, if we say these are the criteria and we want you to weigh all of them.
Mhm.
We could make the rubric and be like, this is how we want you to score it. Or we could say, these are the criteria for this program. And we want you to weigh all of them taken as a whole.
Okay. That makes sense.
I was just gonna say, I guess Habitat must do this already.
They do.
Like for the homeowners, they must have like some way of evaluating homeowners for if they can follow through and stuff.
They actually train them. It's a different type of project, really.
Yeah.
Because they deal mostly with people who are not yet homeowners.
Yeah.
But there's probably a lot of similar things we could take if they're willing to share them with us. Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, just, to make it explicit, just like, I think we don't, it's fraught. Picking people is fraught, and we don't want to do that.
Right.
So I think we definitely want to pass through someone who has expertise.
Yes. I agree with that. We don't want to be really the ones choosing the people. It makes it so much cleaner if we're not. So yes, hiring a consultant to do that makes a lot of sense to me.
So project viability may consider additional funding sources. For cost saving sources, including savings, other loans, sweat equity or labor on the project. The proposed living space, the proposed ADU is an appropriate living space. The extent to which the landlord applicant meets purpose 3 of the pilot goals.
Mhm.
And is there anything else that we would want them to score applications on?
Not that I can think of, but something may come up at the general meeting.
Okay. So when Jane and I do get a hold of each other, which I'm hoping will be before we meet next week. I will use that as an opportunity to also kind of just get a sense of what it would take for an organization to do that part. And if something like if we're thinking like a $5,000 fee, it's a little bit, I'm thinking that there's the possibility that it might be a little bit different than the rental assistance program.
Yeah.
Because I could imagine that the labor around that kind of is embedded in other things they're already doing. And so that's a question I have, like, would this be a staff time issue for a subcontractor versus like a flat administrative fee? So hopefully I can have that information, and then that means we pretty much have, we have our recommendation.
Yeah.
Good job, group. Way to stick.
You guys, this is tough work. So well done.
Thank you.
Yep.
Also,
stick it
none of
out.
us got mad or mean.
Right. That's never required, really, is it?
It's never required, but it's such an easy thing to do by accident.
Oh my God, yes.
All right, so I will share. Oh geez. Did any of you look at the agenda posted for next week?
I looked at it, but I don't remember anything about it.
I'm assuming Fred put something about this on it,
Well, I think I have it here.
because otherwise I think we missed the window.
Well, I know I have it here.
Excellent.
I don't see.
I'm still sharing my screen, so
Because I know over email, I think I did communicate with him that I really thought that we could wrap this up in this meeting.
Yeah, it's on there. ADU incentive workshop report.
Great. So we'll use the report, and we'll use the report to make the recommendation.
okay.
Chris, would it be an issue for us to vote on approving something under a agenda item that says it's a report?
Possibly. You could email Fred tonight, maybe he can revise it slightly.
But I think that the last day we could have posted it because of the holiday was today.
Yeah, I think making a minor emendation to say report and vote.
Oh, what does it say now?
I don't think it would be too horrible.
Okay, I will send that email to him and I'll just CC you, Chris, in case he has any questions.
I won't see it. I'll be off.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it says ADU incentive workshop report.
Great. My question was, is there, if we're voting, I think we have to notify the public that we're making a vote on. And what Chris is saying is that is a minor correction
It's written a little bit vaguely at the moment.
Yeah,
Some correction that we could make to
You
the
know-
agenda that wouldn't be considered a new posting.
no, and also if we get a report and someone says, I like this report, I move that we accept this proposal. You can have a vote. I mean, I think there's enough of it on the
There were-
agenda.
There was just, there was a recent issue with the rest of the river,
Yeah,
which is why I raised this question, that since we have locally been directed to be a little bit less vague, I would like to do what we can to be less vague.
Yeah.
And I
or
like,
just leave it as is and vote at your next meeting. I mean, maybe people want to think about it more, or
I predict that there's gonna be a lot of discussion, so.
Yeah, it may not get to a vote at the meeting,
I certainly won't know more from town council for a while.
right?
Okay,
I've got a side bet that we're not gonna vote on it at the meeting anyhow.
no, I don't think we're going to.
just leave it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would just leave it. I would just leave it and then also that will be, I think it's better to like let it sit anyways. When I think it's better to present it and let it sit than ask people to try to vote.
So we'd like the format next week when we meet to be presenting it. And then
Yeah.
opening for discussion
Yeah.
and also answering questions around our thinking.
right.
Yes. Yeah,
And
hashing it out. Yeah.
that would also have to be incorporated into the proposal.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be another meeting. Anyway, anyway you look at it.
I will say, just process wise, that if there's like, if the trust raises a significant issue that they really like, it's clear something needs to be reworked and there aren't the votes to do it without reworking it. My process suggestion would be that then we bring that issue back to workshop outside of the full trust meeting with that feedback.
Sure. Yeah, it's fine by me.
Yeah,
Great. All right. Last but not least, trustees speak time.
Mhm.
No
None for me.
citizens are
Oh.
on.
You got it all out?
I do have
Yeah.
some interest in the properties being taken by the town for back taxes, but
There's a great example of poor communication. Just to say here, and Mark and I have been trying to address this for the last 48 hours.
okay.
A tax taking is the filing of a lien that says you haven't paid your taxes.
Mm,
We get first dibs. If after a time the people are not going to pay their taxes, the town can then file an intent to foreclose. This typically takes a year or two.
Yeah,
Oh my God.
So from the time a notice of taking is filed, that just means they haven't paid. We're putting a lien on. It could take 2 years because maybe they enter into a payment process.
So
If they
the-
don't, then we wait and then we go into foreclosure and that takes another 2 years.
yeah,
This is not a point where the town has any control over that property. This is just a claim of money. We don't have any other rights. And we don't until it goes through foreclosure, and that is not for many years at this point. Land court is very slow. So
Yeah.
don't get any hopes up.
Wow.
Short answer.
hope springs eternal,
Fair answer.
crushed often, but
40 Grove Street took 4 or 5 years,
yeah,
but until it got into the trust's hands. So. Anyway,
interesting.
Citizen speak time.
There are none.
Okay. Media speak time.
There
There
are
are
none.
none.
I move we adjourn the meeting.
I second.
All in favor?
I
Aye.
It's the best part to do formally because it's most fun.
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night.